Rebekah Roth here again. This time I just want to touch on another little story for you because it was shared with me by a former air traffic controller. And he had an interesting story, and this is a guy, he's passed away now, but he was a air traffic controller at Edwards Air Force Base. And if you get your Google map out, you can see where Edward Air Force Base is in conjunction with the Mojave Air and Space Port, I think is what they call it. It's pretty close. And once we started working together and he was realizing what we had come upon with all of the data, all the eyewitnesses and all the data, he and I worked quite a lot together. He told me a story that eventually for him started to make sense. And one night, and this was, he couldn't really remember for sure, it was sometime in the weeks, perhaps months, maybe 2-3 months, leading up to 9/11, before 9/11. And every time they'd come on their shift, they would get an intelligence briefing from the military intelligence there at the base. And they were told several times when this would happen that a Russian cargo plane would fly in over highly restricted airspace, and they would be landing at Mojave. And these two gentlemen ended up being so curious about what was going on with this huge Russian cargo plane. But he said it because he talking to the pilots, because he was the air traffic controller, the pilots spoke with a British accent. And he thought, well, this is very odd. We've got this restricted airspace, and he's really even if the president came through, they wouldn't put him through this restricted space. And so it was just very odd to them. Well, they got to watching this happen a few times and got to talking amongst themselves. And then eventually they set up that one of them took a camera and went over at the Mojave airport. In World War II, they had ammo bunkers. And if you look, if you know what you're looking for, you can kind of see them. They're like a little mound. And this Russian cargo plane was there unloading pallets of gold. Pallets of gold. He was looking with binoculars and his camera, and they were taking this gold to these ammo bunkers, I guess. So he had pictures, and then they were telling me about what they found. And it didn't dawn on them, or they didn't connect it to 9/11 until I was probably in an interview telling the story of the FEMA photographer who the government put through hell, charging him with murder of his wife and all this crazy stuff. But the FEMA photographer that was there photographed one of the vaults underneath the towers in the World Trade Center that had basically been opened when the collapse happened. He went in there that evening, I guess. And there was dust there where the gold had been removed, and there was just dust on the shelves. And then I believe there was also a truck that had broken an axle trying to leave that also had some of the, there was these major vaults there with precious minerals, gold, silver, etc. And so once we got all these pieces, the story came out, and talking to the air traffic controllers, and I guess eventually that gold was taken out of there. And I think they had a pretty good idea when it was removed, because they were watching, because they knew what was there. But again, they never connected it to 9/11 until afterwards, and after we started talking about the 9/11 story. So I just think that's kind of fascinating. It was such a great story that I made my third book, the cover be gold color, because it really does tell that story in that third novel. And the fact that they found these vaults mostly emptied tells you that somebody knew this was going to happen. Now, besides the put options that someone from the CIA had put on, they've never collected, There were other people like the 5 dancing Israelis who went home eventually and went on television and said they were sent to document the event, and they'd gotten arrested by the East Rutherford police. And I'll be doing a video on that too, because it's not an anti-Semitic conspiracy. I have the police records, and I'll share them with you as well.